This is PrepTest 159, Section 2, Passage 4. This is a law passage about what ownership actually means. 3 theories compete for the answer, and the author picks a winner. The difficulty level is medium. The structure is clean, but there is a trap buried in how the author complements a theory right before destroying it. Now, this is an argument passage. The author is choosing sides. The main point is ownership is not about keeping people out. It's about the owner having a special position to decide what happens with what they own. Now, the most important moment in this passage is a 2-sentence distinction between 2 meanings of the word exclusive. Everything turns on that split. When you hit it, you want to slow way down. The passage opens with the bundle of rights view. This is the standard position. Ownership isn't one right, it's a whole collection. Lease, sell, subdivide, and tax. And that collection of rights grew out of individual court decisions over time. And because it's open-ended, the concept of ownership doesn't really box judges in. They can shape it however the case demands. Now read this part at normal speed because you just got to have the basics in your head. Then you get the challenge. The boundary theory says no. Ownership is one clear right, the right to exclude others from your stuff. And because that right is definite, it does constrain what judges can do. Now don't slow down yet because the passage is still arranging pieces. The real argument hasn't started yet. Now the author steps in, and that's where you got to pay close attention. The author gives the boundary theory a compliment first. It properly recognizes that ownership constrains judicial reasoning. And that sounds like the author's on board. But the author is not on board. That one nice sentence is bait. Everything after it is a takedown. Now here is what the author says is wrong. The boundary theory only describes what non-owners can't do. It defines ownership by process of elimination. Exclude everyone else. Whoever's still standing is the owner. And what do you know about the owner? Almost nothing. Just that they are at liberty to use the thing after everyone else got kicked out. The author calls this the weakest possible account. And that is not a soft critique. That's the author saying this theory barely explains anything. And then the author twists the knife, calls it a theory of non-ownership. Think about that. A theory that is supposed to define ownership, and the author says it's really about what non-owners can't do. If you see that label show up in a wrong answer that treats it as a positive description, don't fall for it. That is the author's sharpest insult. Now, here is the moment where skimming will cost you points. The author says, yes, ownership is exclusive. The boundary theory is right about that. But the boundary theory gets the wrong kind of exclusivity. There are 2 senses. First sense, others have a duty to stay away from the thing. That is exclusion. Second sense, the owner holds a special position that nobody else shares. That's about what the owner gets to do, not about what anybody else can't do. And those meanings might sound close, but they're not. The first is defensive, keep people out. The second is active, the owner runs the show. If you blur them together during the read, you're going to pick answers that feel right but miss the point. Now, the third theory grabs that second meaning. The agenda setting theory says ownership is exclusive because the owner gets to call the shots for the resource. A farm owner decides how the land gets used, and the law protects that position not by walling everyone else off, it does it by lining up other people's interests with what the owner decided. The word harmonizing matters here. It tells you the agenda setting theory sees other people as participants, not trespassers. The boundary theory sees them as threats, and that is a completely different picture of how ownership works. The author lands squarely on the agenda-setting theory. That is the view the passage endorses. The passage runs on a narrowing sequence. 3 theories, and each one gets closer to the real answer. The first is too loose, the second focuses on the wrong thing, and the third nails it. You're being walked toward a destination, and recognizing that shape keeps you from treating each theory as equally valid. Now, the author's stance is full endorsement of the agenda-setting view. The main trap is that complement toward the boundary theory. Students read properly recognizes and think the author has a mixed or balanced view, but the author does not. One kind sentence followed by a full rejection is not balance. And if you miss that turn, you're going to get the attitude question wrong. You'll also blow function questions about why the passage spends so much time pulling apart 2 senses of exclusive. Now, before you hit the questions, make sure you can answer these 3 things. First, what is the difference between the 2 kinds of exclusivity the author identifies? 2, why does the author call the boundary theory a theory of non-ownership? And 3, what does the agenda setting theory say the law actually does instead of just keeping people out?